Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Camille Tootie, former executive editor of NextGov, longtime storyteller and podcaster. I'm excited to welcome you to today's conversation, From Zero to Hero, how Zero Trust is revolutionizing federal IT security. The sudden onset and persistence of remote work, along with the growing use of digital technologies, exposes the federal government to new and increasingly severe security risks. To address that, agencies are seeking to modernize and improve their cybersecurity infrastructure by embracing zero trust architecture and changes in the workforce. Within the past few years, a plethora of presidential and agency directives, strategies, and models for zero trust architecture have been announced. With the persistence of working from home and potential funding for zero trust initiatives now on the horizon, how are agencies planning and preparing to secure themselves? Here with me to discuss just that are the Department of Energy's Senior Advisor for National Cybersecurity Policy and Programs, Amy Hamilton, Steve Vetter, the Senior Global Strategist at Cisco, and Lonnie Addox, Lumen's Director of Product Management for Public Sector Cybersecurity. We are going to explore what technology investments will help to ensure network security, harnessing solutions for a remote and hybrid workforce, and how they're applying zero trust principles to meet TIC 3.0 initiatives. So to start off the conversation, why don't you all tell me a little bit about yourself and how your organization is approaching zero trust? Let's start with Amy.
Thank you so much for Camille. I'm happy to be here today. One of the things that we looked at from the Department of Energy was an executive order 14028 was first issued. It was a strategic initiative, and we developed a plan for our entire department. That was in July of 2021. Then OMB issued a zero trust strategy directive that came out in January of 2022 with a due date for agencies in March of 2022. With that, we really focused on our headquarters and making sure that our headquarters was focused. And recently, we then focused on our department elements and sites. We do have those plans right now, and we are looking at different ways that we can take advantage of partnerships, shared opportunities, and looking at like where the gaps are. One of the things about zero trust that's been very interesting is initially we focused on each pillar. We followed the system maturity model that has 5 pillars. But if you look at pillars, they're really kind of silos of excellence, if you will. So what we started to look at is how do the different pillars work together? And the system model has the 3 steps. So we looked at those steps and we said, how does this work? We started these ZTA tabletop exercises, which we were calling ZTA TTXs. And from that, we're getting a much better understanding using real use cases within our department of how they should all work together. So that's sort of the approach we're taking. And then from that, we're looking at different solutions. Some may be processes that we can approve. Some may be technical solutions. So there's really the entire gambit. So not everything actually takes resources when it comes to cost, but one of the biggest resources we're finding is it's really taking up a lot of time.
Lonnie?
Hi, thanks for having me here today. Happy to join. So, here as a director of product management for public sector cybersecurity at Lumen Technologies. At Lumen, we actually have one of the largest footprints as a tier 1 ISP service provider. So we utilize that network visibility to develop threat intelligence to help protect our customers against cybersecurity attacks. So specifically as it relates to zero trust, what we are doing is working to currently provide and develop managed security service offerings, such as secure internet and endpoint detection response services in alignment with those zero trust requirements that's defined by DHS CISA and the OMB mandate. So we're following along with the DHS CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model, the NIST 800-207 Zero Trust Architecture document, along with those capabilities and requirements within the executive order and the OMB mandate. And with that, we're focused on pretty much more so the solution integration that's required to support a zero trust architecture. One of the features or capabilities that come along with enabling a zero trust architecture is the integration of your security services. So the intent is to no longer have siloed security services. We want to integrate them so they are working together and can support, a holistic solution for you. So at Lumen, we're working on focusing and developing those types of solutions. So lots of exciting things going on.
Great. Steve?
Well, it's great to be here as well, and really excited to talk about Zero Trust. It's a major focus of Cisco, where I'm a global strategist, and I work extensively with NIST, with the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, with CISA, and it's really to help implement those strategies, frameworks, architectures to make maximum value to the agencies in accomplishing their missions. So we really view it as an end-to-end architecture. We look at it from the standpoint of a network, data center, cloud, the edge, how does 5G, operational technologies play together? And all of those pieces need to work seamlessly together in order to ensure that workloads and data are protected no matter where it's being accessed. And even more importantly, as we're seeing things like the new binding operational directive, how can we ensure that not only people, but machine to machine communications and data can be protected as well? And so our focus runs the gamut. And as Amy was saying, lots of different ways to approach it. It's not just technologies, it's processes, and it's a way to look more holistically at how do you reduce the threat and increase the capabilities of the agencies to accomplish their missions.
Amy, what are the biggest benefits from implementing Zero Trust? And do you have any specific use cases you would like to highlight?
So the impetus for the executive order began with SolarWinds, which was a significant incident where they found that actors were able to take advantage of a vulnerability within the SolarWinds, and several agencies had compromised. So based on SolarWinds, there was also a Microsoft Exchange incident. Both those were focused by the GAO, so it can be found there, as well as at the same time, a commercial company, Colonial Pipeline, had a attack that was by ransomware that had a significant impact on the economy. So looking at those three things, Executive Order 14028 was directed. So these are like real world things that happened prior to the executive order. Since then, there's been incidents in VMware, in Log4j vulnerability, and others. And so what we're really looking at is how do we make sure we're maximizing our very limited resources? And if you look at traditional cybersecurity, where it was built on a moat and castle approach, it was very much like try to keep everything within the perimeter protected and everything outside the perimeter was vulnerable. With the pandemic, that's really fundamentally changed the model, as you addressed in your lead in. Right now, people are working in different environments. We can see that on our webcast today. So it's very important that we recognize every person, no matter where they're at, if they're accessing the information, they're exposing the information in different ways. So it's really fundamentally figuring out what is the data, why does it need to be protected, to what level does it need to be protected, and under what circumstances. So if I'm looking, for instance, at open science, that information should be out in the public, right? So you're like, oh, we don't have to secure it. But the integrity of that data, if you could change open science information, that could fundamentally change the research that you're going to be building on. So the integrity of that data may be much more important than a confidentiality. On the other hand, when I'm looking at power marketing administrations, it's the availability of electricity that matters the most. So you really have to look at the entire model, looking at the mission, looking at the data, looking at the level that it needs to be protected. What you have to realize is you can't protect everything all the time. So you really have to look at the most important things and how to address it under unique circumstances. There's certainly not a one size fits all.
Steve, you're nodding along as Amy's speaking. What resonates with you most?
Absolutely. I'm a complete believer in the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Too often people only see it from the area they sit in. And Amy brought out a great point, which is you've got to make sure that you're seeing it from what is your mission goal in terms of accomplishing that. And that's what I think is so important about where Amy talked about CISA's maturity model with the 5 pillars. I love the foundational elements underneath it: the visibility and analytics, the automation and orchestration. Because when you bring those elements to bear, you now have a way to do something that we've never been able to do with an adversary, at least in my career, which is to take that high ground back. If we can now dynamically change the network environment, change the security environment in response to what we're seeing with anomalous activity, we're doing that in real time, then everything the adversary knew about being inside the network, which is a fundamental principle of zero trust, that you assume a breach, what we call need to know inside of that environment, that they're inside the environment, then all of a sudden you have the ability to dynamically reconfigure, and they don't know anything about the way it was, which promotes availability and ensures that the integrity and confidentiality are assured there. So I love the approach that Amy took, and I really believe that there are some great examples of that when you start to think about the mission. So there's a four-letter agency, but it's huge, and it started on the corporate side of implementing zero trust. And just within the last 6 months, working with the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, are expanding their solution across the entire mission areas. So to Amy's point, looking at it from the standpoint of headquarters and then across the entire enterprise to deliver the zero trust capabilities so agency missions can be accomplished.
That's great.
Lonnie, do you have any use cases you would like to highlight in terms of the government customers Lumen is working with?
Yeah, we're working with several customers to help begin on their zero trust journey. And just to make one more note back to what Steve was saying, on the principle of assuming the breach, I think that's very key to understand when you're working on implementing zero trust architecture. If we're looking at those bad actors or the enemy who may already be inside or compromised on your network, they have a deep awareness of your network. They're inside your network to learn your network, to learn where your vulnerabilities and your gaps are. And that's one of the intents that agencies or organizations have to implement along that zero trust journey. Is when they begin that implementation, they have to go in and learn their network too. You need to learn your network better than the enemy does while they're sitting there scanning your network and understanding where your gaps and vulnerabilities are.
So agencies are well underway with their zero trust implementation, but what are some of the challenges that IT leaders often encounter when trying to implement zero trust across their organization? Amy, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm going to say the first thing is going to be something that we've traditionally done very poorly in IT. And I think it's really an opportunity for us to do better. And that is working with our mission partner side, really understanding what is the business case needs, what is the mission needs, like why, what data is important, how does the mission actually work? And understanding that is absolutely critical. We cannot be seen as people who are preventing people from doing their jobs. One thing that we've really seen from the pandemic is the importance of IT and cybersecurity as mission enablers. And I think it's really helped to get the IT and cybersecurity leaders to the table to have these important discussions. And one of the things we did is we brought in our acquisition team early. It has to be a life cycle approach. It has to be, including the entire supply chain from the beginning till the end of the life cycle. Another aspect of it is, including important teams, which has been our CFO team and getting the financial officers there in the beginning, getting the Chicos there, making sure the human resource aspects of what this means is understood, and bringing them to the table early so that they're not confused, and then learning how to speak in a way that's going to resonate with the different audience that you have. We developed a very simple business use case, really focusing on why data has to be understood, why it has to be encrypted, and why MFA, multi-factor authentication, phishing resistant credentialing is essential as a first step in our ZTA journey. When we first started doing that, we're like, look, you just have to use MFA, blah, 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 blah. And they were just like, this is like, want, like we're not listening to you. Whereas when we came in, we started explaining like, if your data is compromised, but it's encrypted, and you have phishing resistant credentials, which means that key is protected, there's very little chance that an adversary can open that data and do anything with it. And then they were like, oh, I get this. Why didn't you say this in the first place? And so it's really coming out of our geek space and our little nerddom and coming down into a way that we can resonate and talk to sort of normal people. And so it's really been a journey on just how to have better relations with the mission owners.
I
I'd
think
love to
that's
jump in on.
actually, yeah.
Go ahead, Lonnie. No, go ahead, Lonnie.
I was just gonna say that's actually a very good point, and that's actually a step that maybe I haven't actually seen implemented so far, is the learning, the education piece of explaining why you're doing what you're doing versus just follow the steps that are provided to you. A lot of agencies that we've seen so far can be overwhelmed with the journey, because this is a significant journey and a significant task to accomplish. So one of the things or advice we give to our agency contacts is to consider this as a perpetual journey. You'll never actually get to the end of this. This will be ongoing for a long time. So develop a tiger team to just get in both technical and project management resources to perform the organization, and then list out, tasks, prioritize initiatives on where you can start. You'll have to start small. It is an overwhelming and can be encompassing task to get completed, but start small and then get started on the journey. But that education piece is actually a very important point.
It absolutely is, and it is going to go on forever. I mean, in the old days, we used to think of, I'm going to be able to defeat an adversary and then I'm done. No, it's an ongoing battle that will continue the entire duration of your involvement with a particular agency. But I think the biggest challenge is going back to what Amy said in the very beginning. It's the silos of excellence. You cannot have zero trust without a holistic understanding of what is going on across a particular agency, across that entire spectrum of what's going through. One of the biggest sea change moments that I saw, and I actually saw the light bulb go off on the CISO's head. I was at a major federal agency, and they were saying, Steve, tell us about a Cisco security tool that we haven't fully implemented or fully taken advantage of yet. And I said, when was the last time you thought about a Cisco switch? And she looked at me, she said, Steve, I said a security tool. And I said, exactly. And all of a sudden the light bulb went on and realized that, wait a minute, the network and the switches and infrastructure there can be part of it. And especially when you saw that come out in NIST 800-207, where an intelligent switch becomes a policy enforcement point, it helps leaders think about, I've got to think holistically. I've got to think about the data center, the cloud, the edge, the network, how do apps fit in. All of that must be done holistically, as Amy was articulating, in order to make sure that you can protect the mission goals and accept reasonable risk and not excessive risk, because you're thinking holistically, and that makes it very difficult for the adversaries. Being a retired naval intelligence officer, I can tell you that's what adversaries are doing. They're looking for the easiest means of access, and they'll shift to a new one if we block them. We have to continually go through, as Lonnie was saying, from an end-to-end perspective to make sure that we are going to be ready for whatever they try next.
It's a game of whack-a-mole, in other words.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lonnie, I have a follow-up question for you. Of all the hurdles that your customers in the government space are facing, which one is the hardest one to overcome?
I guess initially, again, of understanding where to start and then also understanding how to implement a zero trust architecture. Again, this is it's a mindset shift. I think as well for a lot of the agencies now, no longer working in silos such as network and security, the teams have to work together. And then understanding that the concept of remote worker and hybrid networks, it's really a mind shift to where you no longer have an inside outside. We're moving to a state of security where we're working on a perimeterless defense. So with that, you have to understand that, we'll need to develop capabilities that can work and for our workers or users who are on the network that are independent of where they're located. We need to be able to have a mind shift to where we're securing the network independent of inside or outside or headquarters or on office. The network is the network now.
Amy, with potential zero trust funding on the horizon, does that change at all your plans for zero trust implementation?
I mean, when it comes to funding, I mean, we're currently in a continuing resolution. We did have a little bit of solar winds funding, which we're very grateful for, that we did receive last year and that we are receiving this year. I think you have to look at everything long term. And, I know IT modernization was sort of the buzzword before, when you really look at it, it has to be a continuous approach. I think Alani brought up a great point about this is a journey, right? And when you say that, it's an unending journey. And so, I've heard it compared to a race. I'm somebody who loves to run like marathons. And I'm like, no, like really, this is your day-to-day marathon training. And then when an event happens, that's like the actual marathon itself. but it doesn't end. It doesn't have like an actual end state. And you have to realize that you also have to look at the workforce succession planning, the next generation, how people are going to take this on. There's no endpoint. The adversaries are not going to stop. It's not like somebody's going to say, oh, look, they've have their compliance checklist. We're not going to attack them anymore. They've got an A on their FATAR scorecard. Like, they're good. I mean, if anything, that's even more incentive for adversaries to try to take our information, whatever the reason that they want for that information, or, if they actually want to do nefarious actions. In the Department of Energy, we have several, operational technology systems, and we're definitely very concerned in that area of how do we protect our operational technology, and not just to protect it from the sense of an agency, but also in the sense of a agency that has a responsibility into the private sector. How are we making sure that we're working with those private sector initiatives? Because it's not just the government doing this alone. This has to be a public-private partnership where we all understand, taking out someplace like Colonial Pipeline can have an economic and an impact on the United States, just like taking out a government organization.
Steve, what are you seeing in terms of your customers, if there's more funding?
Right. I mean, our customers are addressing the same challenges Amy was talking about. Operational technology and information technology are working more closely in hand. As she was talking about Colonial Pipeline, many people think that that was actually an operational technology attack. In fact, it was an IT attack because they hit applications on how to bill for and how to track gas flow into the eastern United States. The actual pipelines themselves were operational, but it was a self-inflicted denial of service attack because they wouldn't get paid for the gas going in that direction. And the inextricable linkage between IT and OT are becoming much more aligned, and it needs to be thought of, as I mentioned earlier, holistically from that approach. And I'm a big believer in Amy and the Department of Energy and what they're doing with the critical infrastructures that our nation has. And if we do this right, to the point that she made earlier, you can actually enhance the operational resiliency of the environment by bringing zero trust to bear. It's not a self-inflicted denial of service. It's not something that makes it harder for the operational technology folks to get their missions done. It actually makes it more assured that they'll get it done. And that's, I think, how we win them over in the cultural journey that is also part of the zero trust environment.
Amy, how are you applying zero trust architecture to meet TIC 3.0 mandates?
So when you look at TIC 3.0, it actually is very different than what TIC used to be. And so, TIC used to be sort of a central funnel, and it was very much an impediment to cloud adoption. One thing that I think OMB and CISA have done very well is coordinating on policy and really giving agencies so much more flexibility. When you look at the TIC 3.0 use cases, it actually really gives us an opportunity to do more. In addition to that, as Stephen has mentioned several times, the NIST guidance has really changed and evolved as well. And so it's allowing agencies the best possible opportunities to take advantage of new technology that is continuing to be in the forefront. Before, cloud used to be very, very difficult. What I will say is it's still very difficult for us in some areas, such as operational technology. We do have some pilot experimentations going on in that area through our control systems working group, which we're very excited about some of the initial things that we've discovered. But on the other hand, there's still a lot of barriers to overcome ahead. So we're cautious, we're optimistic, and at the same time, what we do appreciate is that flexibility in guidance coming out of OMB and CISA. And I think it's a time of unprecedented partnership right now that we have not seen before.
And to follow up on that, for other federal agencies looking to implement these mandates, what's your best advice?
Is that for me or for Lonnie or
For you.
I think for any agency, it's just remember too that you're not alone. And I work with several different agencies on different initiatives all the time. And I think that you first get something like Executive Order 14028, and you come out and you're like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to do this? But then when you realize like every other federal agency is going through the same process, and we're not alone. And then also, as I just mentioned, Lonnie and Stephen, we have these amazing interagency intergovernmental partners and private partners who are all with us. So don't consider it like you're there alone. Don't consider your vendors to be like, oh, they're just there to sell you something. I mean, they should also be there in this partnership. I think one of the greatest things is been people who we already have services from saying this is how you can take advantage of the service that you already get and to really optimize it. So I think that it's all those different partnerships on every level that we have to be aware of. It's been really interesting as well to watch is state and local governments have really become involved in these areas as well. And it's, as Lonnie said, it's a journey and we're all in this together.
Mhm.
And just building on what Amy was saying, it's so critical, I think, for that partnership between industry and the government agencies that we support, because the technology is moving with such rapidity that as Amy was saying, and we know our technology is better than they ever will. Why would they need to know the intricacies of what Lumen is doing or what Cisco's doing? So it's our job, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that they know the latest of what we're bringing to market. What are the roadmaps? How are we working with them to evolve the products so that it answers the needs more effectively, working with early field trials of products, et cetera. And it's that partnership then of how to take full advantage of what they've invested in. And I spend most of my time talking to government CXOs about, you realize you already own these 3 Cisco products and these, you put them together and this is what they do. And it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize. That is powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the partnership element is very key. And just as Amy mentioned, we are all on this journey together. Even us as corporate organizations are also going through our own zero trust journey and having to do our own gap analysis and assessment and looking where we need to make advancements and implementations from a corporate structure. So that's helpful, I think, to some of our agencies to know that we can be empathetic in that sense of understanding what is needed to support the journey.
Lonnie, what do you think federal agencies should look for when it comes to a partnership with a vendor? What are some of the key things to consider?
I think you should definitely look and identify partners that are able to help you meet the initiatives and the goals that you define for your organization. Each implementation of a zero trust architecture is going to be custom and unique and specific to that particular organization. So once you define what your goals are, what your initiatives are, what type of support that you need, then you're looking to identify vendors or partners who have key capabilities in those areas.
And I would build on that and say the most important thing I always expect a government agency to ask is, are you open and are you extensible? In other words, prove to me that you can work with the tools I've already invested in. How can I
Mhm.
take advantage of the data that I'm already drawing in? Because no one company does it all. It is a team
Exactly.
sport for zero trust,
Yes.
and being able to deliver that is essential. And open extensibility are the table stakes of any vendor that's serious about helping our government agencies protect their critical infrastructures and their missions.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's just a word of warning. Stay away from anyone who says they do it all. I mean, we understand this is a team sport and we clearly anticipate to work with other partners as we support our agencies.
So remote work is not going anywhere, and neither is hybrid work. So with this comes data sharing across agencies. What are some additional security measures an agency should have in place? Steve?
Okay. If you take a look at what they're doing now, I think it goes back to one of the key foundational elements. CISA will tell you that before you even look at how to architect your zero trust framework, what are you trying to protect? So it causes the agencies to look at their high value assets. What is the goal? Remember, one of the other foundational premises is least privileged access inside of a zero trust model. And that means letting organizations, employees have only the data they need to accomplish the mission. So I think it's a dialogue that helps people understand what they're trying to accomplish, doesn't stifle innovation, but still gives them only the access to accomplish their goals without overexposing the individual environments. That's why I think it's a multi-team sport game when you're taking a look at it, because you're thinking about things differently inside of each agency. Different organizations with the agencies may need to partner differently. You may need to access things in different ways with different policies, and they must be dynamic because you will change as you're going through. And you may realize, wait a minute, organization A, B, and C needs access to this data. And so it can't restrict the productivity of an organization by ensuring they have access to it. So the ability to dynamically allocate capabilities, redesign, reconfigure, I think is essential to a hybrid work model, which I agree with is around forever. It's not going away.
Hmm. Absolutely. I definitely agree with that as well too. And when it comes to protecting the data, it's critical to understand the data. So data classification is going to be a key element that other organizations and agencies will need to implement to understand what data is on the network, what applications are your users accessing, what time of day are they accessing it. Because as a service provider with Lumen, we offer managed security services, but we'll need to understand where do we need to apply the policies at for your network, and what level of risk are associated with those particular applications. And we'll need you to define that for us.
And I think a super important thing that Steve brought up earlier was this whole point about the automation and orchestration. If
Mhm.
you cannot automate these processes and you're expecting to have an empire of analysts who are manually doing this, you are not going to be successful. You absolutely have to crack the code on repeatable processes and automation.
Definitely.
There's simply not the workforce pipeline out there. And right now, a lot of agencies are overwhelmed because they might even have the data, but they just don't have the ability to even go through and all the data. So it's really getting to that point of how do you automate the different tools that are out there, take advantage of them so that you're getting the rich, exquisite analysis that you need to make good decisions.
Hmm.
We've been really stressing how zero trust is a journey, but obviously you can't lift and shift your entire security stack. So, what investments will help government leaders ensure their tactics, techniques, and policies are really ready for the continued hybrid workplace? Let's start with Lonnie.
Sure. Yeah. Again, just to go back to the assessment and understanding of the environment, there will need to be an investment into that for our agencies so that they understand where that they need to go and put the additional investments in their environment for the security services that they're looking to implement. So with that, I'd say also we want our agencies just to continue on looking at where they can enhance existing capabilities, where there can be modifications to technologies they already have in place, with a matter of just updating the standards or configurations that are being utilized, and then which technologies will they need to replace, because there will be some replacements that are going to probably be required. So making a list of prioritizing which, again, technologies that they think that they'll need be better off with replacing and putting in new capabilities, and then look at the duration of how long you think you'll be able to have those new capabilities in place as well.
Steve.
I really think that she's hit it on the head. It really starts, I think, with assessing the risk that you're going to have. That was called out by Amy earlier. You're doing and working in a new way now with hybrid work. Well, how are you going to change what needs to be done to still have an optimal way to achieve the mission overall? And then, most importantly, agencies have made intelligent investments in security over the past decade. And even though there is money coming, even more money coming, I think we're getting about a 20% annual growth rate in security budgets. You're still seeing the ability to identify gaps, build on and integrate to the things you've already invested in, and then say, here's how my organization is going to change and evolve as a result of the way we're doing work today and tomorrow, and then make intelligent investments to fill the gaps so it delivers you, again, visibility and analytics, and then the ability, as Amy was saying, to automate and orchestrate so that you can then make sure that there is no manual process. It can be automated, but you're doing that intelligently as a result of detection of anomalous activity, because sometimes anomalous activity is just that. It's just unusual. It needs to be fixed. It's not an adversarial attack, but you need to be able to distinguish when anomalous means something bad is going on, potentially malicious.
Exactly.
I think another important aspect of that is really looking at what Lonnie alluded to earlier, which is data. And it's very interesting. A report came out recently saying 50% of CDOs have said they do not actually understand like what their jobs are in the federal government. And that's very scary because the data is what we have to protect. And traditionally on the security side, I think the three pillars we're very comfortable with is we're comfortable with device, we're comfortable with identity, we're comfortable with networks. And what I think you'll see is if you look at the reports, it shows we are stronger in those areas. That's where your traditional security stacks lie. When you look at applications and when you look at data, that's really where we're more vulnerable right now. And a lot of it goes back into we have to have those partnerships. We can't look at technology as the solution. We have to look at understanding of our data and understanding how our data traverses. So where should your data live? Where should your data never live? Who should have access to that data? For how long should they have access to that data? How often are we checking to make sure that we've updated it? What is the priorities when it comes to making sure if people are leaving our organization that they no longer have access to that data? How are we managing the endpoints? Are we making sure that at those endpoints the data cannot be downloaded in some other way? So there's just so many different aspects to look at it just from a data aspect. And I think that this is something that's relatively new for cybersecurity practitioners to get their heads around. And as I've been talking about this within the Department of Energy, I think it was probably 6 months in when at one of my components, one of the CISO said, "Oh my gosh, we have to fundamentally re-architect our entire networks." And I was like, "Yes, you get it." And it's taken a lot because people, they're coming in with 20 or 30 years of cybersecurity experience, and they're still coming in very, very focused on a net-centric approach. And it's really that cultural change that Steve has mentioned that we have to change. We have to go in and change cultures, and that's going to take time.
Mhm.
And I think one of the other big things that's coming, not only do we need to understand the data, but we need to understand the power of AI ML and what it means, and the ability to train algorithms on huge data sets to automate the processes and learn like no human ever could. In the military, we have a saying that a lot of times we tend to fight the last war. The adversaries in the future for cyber are not the way they did it in the past. We need to be thinking holistically about how they are going to be coming at us and what we can do to prevent that and dynamically change the environment so they have no idea what we're doing. That enables us, as I said earlier, to get to the high ground. And that is a game change that we need to help our government leaders understand, that the technologies will be a key enabler as they put together this holistic end-to-end continuous journey for the rest of their government lives.
As we're wrapping up today, I would love if you all could share one piece of practical advice for our audience today. What should people start doing this week, and what should they, be looking for in 6 to 12 months to determine if they've actually made progress? Amy.
I would start off with really start the interaction between the pillars. As I mentioned, doing very, very simple use cases across our pillars. It was fascinating that we had owners of like our data and our applications that had no idea who our cybersecurity personnel were, and just introducing them and encouraging them, like talk to each other. Like, don't go out and start looking at your data categorization solution, not bringing in the rest of the elements from the beginning. And I know it can be time consuming to talk, but it's a lot more time consuming to have to rebuild it later. So have the early discussions, do the planning, and then do it incrementally. Like, it's okay to fail fast. It's really bad to fail slow. Like, don't spend a whole year like trying to do one big mammoth project. Like, do it in an agile approach.
Mhm.
Lonnie.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything Amy just said there. Planning is going to be very key for our agencies, and just take it, in small bites. Again, it's a long journey. It's a perpetual journey, and you'll never really get to the end of that. So just take it, one initiative at a time. Define short goals, and then assess those goals as you start to mark those off. There will be mistakes learned. It's a learning process, so be forgiving as you work through this. And again, as vendors in this space or supporting a managed security service there, we're also on the journey with you. So a lot of this is a learning process for us as well too, which is why we partner with other vendors and technologies such as Cisco and team in order to help enable these automation and the capabilities that we know our agencies are going to need.
And I agree with everything that both of them said, but I'm going to be the radical here because remember, I'm a strategist, right? So what I would say is at the end of every week, take 15 minutes and think about how you did business this week and what have you learned in terms of technologies and capabilities that will enable you to change the way you do business in the future as you move forward. Too often, I think we get caught in a compliancy checklist mindset in the federal government, and it prevents us from understanding the big picture of what we're doing. Throughout this entire discussion that we've had, we've talked about the mission that needs to be accomplished. That's the objective. And you don't get there from compliancy checklists. They're tools that will help, but the goal is to make sure the mission is accomplished, that the environment's available, that there is integrity to it, and that there is confidentiality. And if we can make sure that people are thinking holistically and change the processes, change the procedures, that is how you deliver innovation to your agency. And I think if you take time at the end of every week and just think, what have I learned this week that could potentially be a game changer like AI ML technology is in the technology arena, I think we can do some amazing things in this nation and continue to lead like we've been doing for the past 50 to 100 years.
Great advice from you. Steve, Amy, Lonnie, thank you all for being with me this afternoon. It's been great hearing your insight. If you missed any segment of from today's event, you'll get an email later this week with the on-demand video. I hope you share that with your colleagues to continue the conversation around some of the government's most complicated issues. I'm Camille Tootie. See you next time.